Hello, and welcome everybody to our latest community event, Making the Move from live chat to messaging. If this is your first time joining one of our community events, welcome. We love to have you here. We've got a ton of great conversations all the time with our community events. And if you're interested, you can check out recordings of all of our previous community events on the Zendesk YouTube channel's community playlist. We'll pop a link in the chat there for you so you can check those out at your leisure. And let's go to the next slide here. We've got a great lineup today. Yeah, next slide. There we go. So I'm Dave Dyson. I'm a Community Engagement Manager here at Zendesk. Today, talking to you, we'll have Paul Lalonde from our product marketing team. He's got a lot of tips and tricks and advice on preparing for a successful move from live chat to messaging. And then Megan Watson from product marketing. She's going to do a little fireside chat with Steve Lacoss, one of our customers from Doorroom Movers, to give you a real life example about what it's like to move from chat to move to messaging there. And then we'll have a Q&A with some answering all your burning questions about moving to messaging. And here's a little detail for our agenda today and some housekeeping. Yes, we're recording. We always do. You will get a link after the event, probably tomorrow or maybe Monday, that will have a link to the recording of the event so you can watch it later. It'll also have summaries of all of the questions that we answer and all of the links that we share during the event. So you get all of that stuff. If you have questions during the event, we welcome those. We do ask that you click over at the top of the chat window. There's a little Q&A button there. We ask that you click over to that and ask your questions in the Q&A tab. That helps us track which questions we've answered and which ones we haven't. So if you ask a question in the general chat, we might gently hey, move it over to the Q&A tab. So we appreciate that. And we will answer all the questions that we can today. But again, if we're not able to get to your question, we'll include those in the summary in the post-event email that you'll get. So without further ado, Paul, what can you tell us about moving to messaging?
Thank you, Dave, for that awesome intro. And thanks as well for just having invited me once again to the community to participate in one of these events. It's been a couple of times that I've done them now. It's always great to see such engagement from the community. The plan that I have today is to walk you through some things that you should be thinking about when planning and preparing a move from live chat over to messaging. I'm sharing information that I've gathered from across the organization, really lots of conversations from advocacy, from our success agents, from solutions consultants, you name it, I've spoken to people. And this is information that I'm passing on that I've shared from other experts in messaging within our organization. Next slide. By now, most of you have probably had some level of knowledge of both chat and messaging. It's probably the reason that you're here. The number one question that we get is, what's the difference between the two of them? I thought I would actually try and answer this a little bit differently today by actually focusing on things that messaging does that chat does not. For example, and I think the big one is that messaging brings automation to the center of every conversation. It comes with much more than just the article suggestions that you get with AnswerBot and chat. Messaging actually gives you simple to use tools for building your own custom bot, which helps you deliver quick answers and reduce the number of repetitive tasks handled by your agents. The best part in my mind is that you only need to configure your bot once, and you can actually, we take care of delivering the consistent experience across different channels. All you need to do is tick a button and select what other channels you want to deploy your bot on, whether it's Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, or Instagram. Messaging also provides a personal touch, even at scale. You can use your bot with recent enhancements that we've made to it to collect customer data, take data from external business systems into conversations, and give customers those little personalized tailored responses without needing a human to do that each time. And lastly, the big one, to a lot of what we're going to be talking about today, is that ongoing nature of the conversation. With messaging, your customers can start a conversation on the web and move it over to email or to a social channel without having to worry about starting it all over again the way that you would have to on chat. And that conversation is ongoing for agents too. So on both sides, it helps them to deliver faster, more productive support. Next slide, and pause while I catch my breath for a second. Excuse me, tried to put myself on mute and I apparently didn't. Apologize for that. As exciting as messaging might sound, swapping out messaging for live chat for messaging rather, it's not as simple as just enabling it. We know that. It actually requires careful planning and consideration because you're going to be dealing with changes on many fronts actually. So changes to the customer experience, your front end, changes to the agent experience and your support operations, so your back end, and even just changes to the way that you interact with other teams in the business as well. So the good news is we've already done some of the planning for you. We've put together a blueprint of sorts that you can follow or adapt to your specific needs to help you plan your move. There's quite a bit to unpack. So what you're kind of actually signed up for today without knowing it is that we're giving you a bit of a crash course in planning, if you will. You're going to get hit up with lots of things you should be thinking about. And rather than go into very specific detail on each item, we're going to be sharing out more detailed guides, training resources, documentation, which is going to be handy for you as you think about planning your move. Let's get started now with gathering your requirements. Before we even get into some of that, note that you need to be on Agent Workspace and have a suite or support and chat license to even be able to see messaging in your support instance. Agent Workspace was redesigned entirely to supercharge your agent productivity using a really conversations first mindset. If you haven't already started using Agent Workspace, you can learn more about upgrading in the link that we're going to include in the chat later on. So now that we got past that, after you've checked your eligibility, take a moment to see if there's any red flags before investing any time planning your upgrade. There are still some scale limitations amongst really high volume customers that might be a non-starter for you. In the case of some customers, there's some breaking changes that you might experience if you have a very complex, highly custom chat deployment. There is the occasional feature that we have on chat that is not yet available on messaging, such as proactive messages, which might be a non-starter for your business as well. So go over that checklist that we put together for you. If you answer yes to any of those questions on the checklist, it doesn't mean that you can't upgrade. It's more like red flag. Make sure that you contact your account representative or Zendesk support to help you further evaluate whether upgrading is the right thing for you to do at this moment in time. Next, start looking at what messaging can and can't do today. Since we launched messaging, we've added a ton of features and functionality, but there are still some problems messaging doesn't solve for, like proactive messages that I just talked about earlier. It's coming next quarter. Maybe messaging solves for it in a different way though. So a lot of times people get caught up in the feature by feature comparison. I'd say that rather than doing that, it's helpful to think about those problems that you're trying to solve for and how they can be accomplished with messaging. An example of this, the concept of wait times. It's very strongly associated with live chat, like you are X in the queue. Wait times were created in chat to set appropriate expectations with customers. You still need to set appropriate expectations with customers in messaging. You just happen to not do it through a queue or a wait time, like a ticker. One way of solving this problem with messaging could be to have your bot send a message which advises your customer of typical response times. Or some people have just gone simply advertising typical response times in the header of their widget. Or in the case of more complex deployments, some customers use an algorithm to actually predict the wait time and have the bot send that message to the customer. As you can see, there's no shortage of options. It's just a way of solving the problem a little bit differently. For admins attending this session, you'll need to understand how migrating to messaging impacts chat settings. Things like chat roles won't exist anymore after you move to the Agent Workspace. The place that you manage the widget is going to change. Metrics and reporting are going to move out of the chat activity dashboard and over to Explore. These are just a few examples. We're going to link out to a Help Center article, which provides a lot more specific information for you to dig your teeth into as well. We just want to highlight the fact that some places that you're used to going to are going to change as a result of making a move. Next, this can even be done in parallel, again, in the spirit of building a blueprint that works for you. You're going to need to end up mapping out the ideal conversational experience, and I'll explain what that means. This is kind of like where planning intersects with operational considerations, which we're going to get to shortly. You're going to want to take a step back, determine what business problems you want to solve by moving to messaging, prioritize them, and determine the KPIs that you're going to use as your North Star for measuring success. We're going to recommend here that you actually process map out what that ideal conversational customer experience is going to look like, so that you can really visualize the workflows that you're building and how that experience is actually going to look. It starts with the greeting. Things that you're going to want to consider are you going to be going all in with messaging, making it the front door, the entry point for all conversations? Are you going to have it sit along other channels like voice and email? Once you've decided that, how are you going to manage customer expectations and when those interactions are always on? From there, you're going to need to start thinking through ticket management workflows, routing and escalation, resolution rules, and how they actually work with messaging. You're going to have to think through offline scenarios, ticket ownership, and how that might change when you're moving away from one-time sessions. So designing that conversational experience is really a step that's not to be taken for granted. You're going to probably spend a lot of time here thinking through planning and consulting with other people and on the operations side and within the rest of the business as you plan this out. I'd recommend adopting this one golden rule. Don't get lost trying to over-engineer these workflows. It becomes really, especially when you're like a larger organization and have a lot of complex places where you're routing tickets to and teams and whatnot, it can be really difficult to undo these things once you've done them. We recommend being pragmatic to start, so design your workflows for simplicity while you're learning out and testing out this new model of service delivery. You can always iterate and improve on that ideal experience as your service delivery experience grows over time. Next thing that you're going to need to look at, because it's integral to the messaging experience, is designing your bot flows. So you're going to need to create an effective bot strategy to extract the full value automation can bring to your business. Here are a couple of things to keep in mind. The first thing that you're going to want to ask yourself is, what are you trying to achieve by implementing a bot, and how is it going to deflect common questions? Are you using it to improve CSAT? Is it to boost agent productivity? So identifying your goals and success metrics will be allow you to more seamlessly build out how your bot is actually going to function. Also, for planning purposes, it's important to determine the right folks to bring in early on when designing that bot experience. This can include working with advocacy to identify topics that can be automated, engaging with brand, and if you have a content team, to develop a style guide for your bot, because it's kind of like it has its own personality. It's an extension of your brand, your company. Identifying the team that's going to manage your bot. Is it going to be operations who manages it, or are there technical developers who need to manage it as well if it's a third party or custom bot? Or perhaps consulting with your security team if they need to be involved with approvals, depending on what business systems you're connecting your bot to. So you're going to also want to ensure that you develop all your tools for governance around managing the bot, especially when you have different people or new employees who are going to be involved. This can include things like defining how testing works, identifying technology and teams impacting by how the bot works, setting rules for using data and systems inside of bot conversations. There might be some compliance you need to follow depending on your organization, or how to use the style guide you're creating to give that bot its little personality. Developing these tools really helps to ensure your bot will always represent your brand and deliver a consistent experience over time, and that you're not breaking anything when you're improving the way that your bot works over time. Finally, working in advance to identify top service issues. A good place to start is to look at one-touch tickets your agency frequently. A good thing to ask yourself is, what should I automate because I can? And what should I not automate because it's super high touch, it's complex, and I don't want the bot to handle that. It's business critical, and I really want to make sure that I have a human interacting with the customer on this particular issue. Remember your North Star, that conversational experience you mapped out earlier. The way your bot will function should tie back to the business priorities and the purpose that you set out for your bot to achieve. Lastly, I'm kind of going to bunch these couple of next ones together. You're going to need to think about conducting impact assessments, also organizing regular check-ins with impacted teams, as well as creating a communications plan to inform internal teams and customers of upcoming changes to the way that support will be delivered and what to expect on the day that changes actually go live. Before migrating, your teams must know how moving to messaging is going to impact their day-to-day tasks. Conducting an impact assessment is going to help ensure a smooth transition. You'll need to identify and uncover what specifically will be changing for agents, customers, your overall operations, and even other areas of your business. I think we need to go back a couple of slides, Megan. Yeah, that one. Thank you. A small tip here, which helped us when we're moving, when we ourselves moved from chat over to messaging, organizing check-ins with your teams to learn more about their perceived impact. There might be things that come up that you hadn't actually planned for, and also using that time to share out some of the benefits that those teams are going to gain once the change that you're introducing is going to be rolled out. The communications plan is probably the most important thing not to mess up. Customers are probably used to reaching out to you in a particular way. If they've been reaching out to you through chat, then waking up to a new bot-driven self-service experience is going to take some time for them to get used to. You'll need to re-educate them on what support will look like and will not look like in advance. Be sure to set appropriate expectations with customers on what your typical first response and follow-up times are going to look like. If customers are used to getting an immediate answer, and now you're telling them it's going to take longer, they need to know. Otherwise, they're going to reach out to you, and when they don't get an immediate response, they're going to think something's broken, and they're going to start escalating, which is what you want to avoid. Okay, you can go to the next slide. I think what we just covered here, a lot of things to think about during the planning phase, but they do, there's no way of separating these topics out from one another. They kind of overlap. We're going to move into some of the operational considerations next of what we just covered. So there's a lot in this piece. We're probably going to need to schedule another deep dive into just operations in another community event at some point. But for today, based on the questions that we got for before the event, we chose the top three that we're going to cover right now, which is around some workflow considerations, workforce management and staffing considerations as well, and another popular topic around KPIs and reporting. So from a workflow perspective, some of the things you want to get ahead of are how to handle ongoing conversations. That widget, it's not like chat where it can disappear when agents are not online. You have a bot now, so your widget is always going to be online. So what do you want the support experience to look like inside and outside of business hours when you are or aren't staffed, when you're not 24/7? When do customers start getting impatient, and how do you set appropriate expectations when there's no queue, like we talked about before? Triage and escalation. You're going to need to think about under which conditions you transfer issues from your bot to your agent using the information it's gathering during the conversation. You're going to need to think through when a ticket is escalated. What channel are you going to follow up on? Should that conversation continue through messaging? Do you want to move that channel over to another channel that's more appropriate for follow-up? Maybe email in certain cases, or even a voice call, depending on what the issue is. So how will customers even been notified of an update on a ticket if that update was escalated to another team and that update comes in days later? So these are all things that need to be considered from a triage and escalation perspective. And offline scenarios is another big one as well. There are various offline situations to account for in messaging, which will change how agents manage tickets, such as when your customer is no longer responsive, when your agents go offline, when your customer responds to a ticket after that ticket is solved or closed. If your customer reaches outside of business hours, how is it going to behave? How is the ticket going to be managed? Last thing, messaging tickets, just like other channels, they're managed in views. Some of these offline scenarios that we're talking about will actually require you to set up some new views to filter between active and idle conversations that go active again and might need reassignment after an agent shift, for example. These workflow decisions are really foundational components to the overall customer experience. They have direct implications on customer experience, the way you staff, and the way you manage your operations. These scenarios should all be accounted for during your planning phase and into operationalizing as well. I know we haven't had a time to walk through every workflow scenario in detail. There's a lot to unpack. We are going to follow up with some best practices documentation for you to look at as you consider these different workflow scenarios to decide what's best for your situation, for your business operations. It will be different for many of you. Next slide. Workforce management. That's another heavy duty topic. KPIs. There's a relationship between staffing, service levels, missed chat, customer satisfaction, and your operating expenses. Yes, of course, you can deliver exceptionally high CSAT and knock your service levels out of the park, but it does come at a cost. Most companies are forced to make a decision on what to prioritize. So choosing which KPIs are most important for you and to design around them is really important. Again, they're part of that North Star that you need to keep on thinking about as you're navigating through this change. Normalizing volume. It's going to take some time to learn how to translate volume from other channels like email, even chat or voice into equivalent messaging volume. You should also anticipate a temporary volume increase as your customers and agents familiarize themselves with the new support experience before you start to see the rewards and the benefits of bringing self-service into the equation. New forecast inputs are something to consider as well. You're going to have to start accounting for those bot deflection rates, so that you're not over planning and overstaffing, because now you have a bot that's in the front line is going to help with some of those self-service issues. You're going to need to think about removing the concept of abandons from your forecast, seeing as sessions can no longer be ended. So all of these things are forecast considerations. And lastly, the way your tickets are handled will change, possibly more touches, but shorter ones. Active and idle conversations are going to change your historical concurrency benchmarks. So you're going to need to set new workload and productivity expectations to avoid idle time. It's possible that you'll need to set some guardrails for handling max number of conversations or max number of inactive conversations, for example. Um, this actually dovetails quite nicely into the last thing I'm going to cover today, which is the reporting piece. Some of you have actually asked for very specific details on what metrics are and aren't available with messaging today. The good news in all of this is that we're just a few short weeks away from making our reporting data set generally available, which bridges most of the reporting gaps that exist between chat and messaging today. Not all of them. SLAs for messaging is one of them. They're not going to be a part of next month's release. They're coming next quarter. We've linked out to a Help Center article, which actually provides a lot more detail, a lot more specifics on which parameters are going to be included in that messaging data set that's coming out next month. So be sure to check it out for those of you who had a lot of those specific questions on the nitty-gritty details. But let's look at what you do get with messaging. We've come a long way since we launched it last year. Last quarter, we launched real-time reporting for messaging. It lets you monitor the end user experience and your teams live. For team supervision, you can use the drill down on the real-time reporting dashboard to have a quick look at which agents are online and what they are working on. If a messaging conversation is taking longer than expected, supervisors can listen in on the conversation and provide help, a whisper is what we call it, using internal notes. And lastly, bringing it home, you can use historical reporting to estimate staffing. Once you have 6 to 8 weeks worth of historical data, it's going to help you, the historical reporting feature, to identify if you have enough agents to handle your customer requests, indicate if reorganizing is required. You can have trends which will help inform whether you need more agents for a certain shift or to handle certain types of queries or customers. And you can use historical reporting to find opportunities to optimize your operations as well. You can measure the health and insights to improve the overall experience, updating setup, tooling, processes, and training. That's all I got. I think at this point, it would probably be helpful to introduce our customer and dive into their experience, right, Dave? Over to you.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Paul. That was a massive amount of information. Thanks for presenting all of that. And of course, and like you said, I mean, it's still, even that is just the tip of the iceberg. There's just so much to know and learn. And we encourage you all to check out the links that mostly Brett and me a little bit posted in the chat there. So Megan, let's get to your fireside chat with Steve Lacoss. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Sure thing.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Dave. And thank you, Paul. Great information that you shared. I have the wonderful honor of interviewing our fellow community member, Steve Lacoss from Dormroom Movers. Actually, Steve is an avid listener to these community events and has attended in the past. So it's a cool opportunity and honor to kind of spotlight him today. So Steve, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So I thought it would be helpful to start here and have you tell us a little bit more about Dormroom Movers.
All right. Since Dormroom Movers launched out of a garage in 2007, we have successfully moved over 95,000 college students at over 250 campuses across the United States. I mean, our service is simple. Upon registration, we'll send out a complimentary supply kit. We pick up directly from the dorm room, store over the summer and deliver back to the students' new room when they return. And then we offer free pickup and delivery on our featured dates. So parents and students can connect with the company's support team by email, messaging, text, voice, and through social media such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. On average, our 10-plus messaging agents engaged in between 700 to 1,000 messaging conversations per month.
Amazing. You guys are busy, and you're definitely in your busy season now. So thanks for the extra time. I do want to give an additional shout out that your company got that innovation award this year. So congrats. So you've been very busy this year. So walk us through a bit more of your reason for moving from live chat to messaging.
Being a forward thinking, we always look to adopt the latest advancements in customer service processes. We needed better ways to deliver real-time communication to the young demographics for millennials and Gen Z. Mobile messaging is the answer. And upper management wanted to upgrade to the Agent Workspace and be able to use the omni-channel features because it's easier when everything's on the same ticket. And the switch to messaging just came hand in hand.
Awesome. Fantastic. Great to hear. And, I think, when you make that shift, obviously there's something you're trying to solve. So what problems were you looking to solve with this shift?
A major challenge that we had before we migrated was tracking customer conversations against multiple channels, email, phone, chat, and having to switch back and forth between Zendesk support and the chat dashboard to view and respond to the message, the conversation in the chat, and then research the other tickets in Zendesk, other user tickets to figure out, okay, what else have they discussed? And so it really made it more like the customer had to give the same information each time.
Gotcha. So it streamlined things for your agents, kind of brought everything in one location for you.
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm going to move to this next slide. I think it's always helpful, especially for the crowd, to see what you've built. But from you more specifically, what is it that the Doorroom Movers built on messaging?
Well, we use the default answer bot. It allows a 24/7 service, and it's able to provide different messages when outside of business hours. So these, if they're wanting to speak to an agent, they understand, okay, we're closed. We'll get back to them when we reopen. Customers just fill out the form before hand over to agents, and this is used to predisposition the tickets for easier routing and prioritizing. Like billing questions get sent to the team that handles the billing, whereas sales gets it's very easy for them. We use a special verbiage in the handover that allows the agent to be able to easily discern that this guy just wants an email quote sent, or they want someone to call them. So I put those as options so they can just send it over to email or have someone call, and they can move to the next one. And this is also reportable via Explorer if done right. Triggers, we use those to set up so that whenever agent is in away status, like during times where there's a lot more conversations than we have the staff available to handle. It hasn't happened in a quite long time, but we set this up so that it sends a message saying, hey, we're experiencing an unusually high amount of traffic, and we'll reply as soon as we can, and give the option to, have us respond an email if they don't want to sit there. If they get impatient sometimes. And we cross-trained our phone team and the email team so that everyone knows how to do messaging, so that when we get very busy and before we have to do that away status, we just redirect our agents to fill in for the rush. And then the other thing we do is I have queue management supervisors that will review the tickets for like the missed chats, and they'll prioritize and call out urgent ones for or assign them for immediate attention.
That's amazing. You've got a well-oiled machine over there. I'll stop sharing the slides so we can kind of look at our faces during this, the last bit of this interview. Change management was a piece that Paul touched on. And so I'd love to hear from you. What was the biggest change you had to manage when making this move from chat to messaging? And why was that the biggest change?
Well, the biggest thing that I had to deal with, and it was definitely the hardest, because it went towards creating the conversation flows in the answer bot. And what I did, I was like one of the first people to jump on the boat, and so there were a lot of features and abilities that are available now. They didn't exist yet, so it turned it into a very long and tedious path. But that's all been eliminated, and they've got this new way that the flows are very simple to create, duplicate, copy, paste, or delete without losing whole chains of flow in the process.
That's great. Thank you for being a trailblazer, getting things started, sharing your feedback so that it's better for future customers. And glad to see that you've appreciated those changes. What has the agent response been to this shift?
Well, the biggest thing that we're excited about was they no longer had to work in the Zopin dashboard and just had everything right there in the Zendesk Agent Workspace. So they didn't have to go flipping around back and forth and, eating the time on that. And then since they were used to the chat format, it wasn't that hard for them to notice any different. They didn't really notice a huge difference until the chat answer bot flows were being published and were appearing in the tickets. I mean, the agents were able to, they found that reviewing those conversations, it often provided great insight as the customer needs, which saves time qualifying. You just take a look back, tell them, give me one moment, I'm going to check your interaction. And, I see that you're asking about when your supply kit's going to arrive. Is that right? So there, that cuts out a whole bunch of time, asking those questions, and you can get to resolving their problem.
That's huge. Awesome. We're always looking for agent productivity, right? So that's fantastic. And then how has the customer experience been? What have your customers have been saying about this?
Well, I haven't received much direct feedback on the customer side. The fact that the answer bot has consistently demonstrated a 75% deflection rate, and the chat volume increase for the switch tells me, people are more receptive to it, because we're getting a lot more messages than we used to get in chats.
That's great. And a 75% deflection rate is incredible. So that's great. It's giving agents more time, and customers are getting what they need faster without needing an agent. So that's amazing. How did the way you operate change? What was the hardest part to figure out, and how did you solve for it?
Well, the biggest difficulty was KPI reporting. When it was originally released, there was no way to calculate first response time or use any SLA timers. So it was never visible for countdowns or being untrackable. But I did come up with a partial solution. I was able to attach a tag when the conversation that's waiting drops into the view and stops flashing in that button up on the live conversations thing. And with that tag, I was able to calculate the number of messaging conversations that were achieved using 10 minutes as the SLA timer, because that's when it drops, versus those that did not get attended in that 10 minutes. So I have achieve percentage. I can go deeper in that in another time, I guess, but because there's a lot to say about it. But 93% of our live conversations are achieved. So very few actually get missed. Explore support dashboard is now able to provide a kind of limited first response time on messaging. And the live dashboard, as was shown previously, offers real-time data. At a glance how many conversations are waiting to be grabbed and how many actively are interacting with an agent. How long the currently waiting tickets are waiting. And then you can also, and this is the part I like, is you can monitor who's in a way or available in the status selection thing. So I can say, hey, you're not available. Get yourself back online. We've got calls waiting. So it's a good way to catch that.
Steve, we've got a couple of questions for you coming from the chat. If you could answer these quickly, and then we'll need to shift over to the Q&A section. And thank you so much for sharing all this information about your and thanks, Megan, for navigating that. So first question is, how long did it take you to prepare to make the shift to messaging? And then if you can also answer quickly, if you can, how do you measure that ticket deflection that you're getting from AnswerBot?
Okay, the first one, when I first signed up for it, it was a series of meetings and with the Zendesk rep, and it was about 2 weeks for the whole process to go through on their end. So I used that time to research as much as I could and to set up my training and planning, and I didn't really start on and making sure my articles had good tags on them, good keywords, so that the AnswerBot's able to recognize when then it's related or to their question.
Cool. And then
the second question,
was how do you measure that deflection rate that you get for AnswerBot, that 75%?
I go to the AnswerBot dashboard, or not the live one, but the dashboard for AnswerBot, and they're able to tell you how many interacted with the AnswerBot, and it also tells you how many of those went on to speak with an agent. So you can pretty much just divide those together to get that rate.
Awesome. Megan, if we can get, thanks so much, Steve, again, and thanks, Megan. Megan, if you can get the slides back up to the Q&A section, we'll get that. And this is going to be our speed round Q&A. So we'll get these questions answered as quickly as we can. First question, will messaging eventually take the place of chat, or will both options always be around?
That's a good question. The answer to that is that we believe that messaging is the future, and that's where we're going to be investing in messaging in the coming years. At the moment, though, customers have both until we address any remaining feature parity items that exist between both chat and messaging today before we will ever consider doing away with chat, so to speak.
Awesome. Thanks. Next question. Is it possible to route messaging to a certain group of agents after a customer has a question regarding a specific product line or family?
For that one, I think that the question is related to, is it possible to route messaging to a certain group of agents after a customer has questions regarding a specific product line or family? You can. You actually need to use the AnswerBot collect data feature in order to actually do that. But once you have that information, it can be used. You can even set your own custom field in order to route that conversation over to whoever you want.
Okay, awesome. Next question. Can you implement messaging but treat it as a live channel?
That's a good one. A lot of our customers actually do use messaging as if it were a live channel, actually. One little known capability of messaging is that the end user experience can be configured to behave like it's a session based experience from within the messaging admin setting. There's this toggle that I think is a tick box, not a toggle, where you can turn off the forget conversation history option. On the agent side, tickets can be configured to solve out after each session, so as to eliminate the ongoing nature of the conversation. Beware of certain things that you cannot replicate exactly the same way, though, such as providing queue wait times, hiding the widget when agents aren't available, and so on.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Next question. Are we considering enabling proactive messaging so we can proactively start chats with visitors the way that we can with live chat?
Yes. So proactive messages are business initiated. There was a question actually as like, what are they even? Proactive messages are business initiated messages that you can set up on your website to behave a certain way on conditions, using conditions that you define. It's like when you visit a website and a pop-up shows from that widget saying, after a certain amount of time, or if you're on a checkout page and it asks you if you need assistance before you even ask the widget for help yourself. That's what we mean by proactive messaging. It is a feature that exists in chat today. It is under development right now at Zendesk. We're supposed to be launching it as per our latest roadmap readout in early Q1 of next year.
Okay, awesome. Thanks. And how do we calm customer anxiety while waiting for an agent to respond?
Yeah, that one, I think it's important to set up, I talked about this a little bit earlier. It's important to set appropriate expectations with customers as to how long it typically takes you to respond when your agents are available and when they're not. We'd recommend starting by building some conditional flows with a different response depending on when you're open and when you're not, so that the bot behaves correctly inside and outside of office hours. And if when your agents are online, conversations aren't picked up immediately, because that's how you've decided to staff up, that's how you decided to deliver your service, be sure to add a step in your flow where the bot is actually indicating what your typical response times are, just so that customers understand what they're going to be able to expect.
Awesome. Thank you. And next question, what additional features will be available this year? Everybody wants to know that.
Yeah, you can actually speak with your account executive or customer success manager for a full view of our 9-month roadmap, which includes messaging. Some of the items, just for those who want a quick answer to this without having to go through the entire roadmap, that reporting data set for messaging, which I just talked about earlier, it's coming out next month. We're bringing redaction to messaging channels, I think at the end of this month or early next month. A new mobile app for agents is coming out. Other related messaging features, Slack direct messages, even more flow builder improvements, for example, flow tagging. And the other one that's coming a little later on is going to be the proactive messages capability that I was talking about earlier as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Okay, so how do you test messaging without launching it out to all your customers?
Yeah, so when it comes to testing messaging before you send it out to your customers, there's a couple of things. For some customers, they actually have access to Premium Sandbox. So that's the best way to actually test it out before. I know that not all customers have access to this feature, unfortunately, but messaging does allow for a couple of ways of testing out your experience regardless. You can actually preview your widget within your admin panel as you're building it out. So you're going to know what it looks like before you actually publish it. And also when you're building your flow builder flows out, you can actually preview them within the flow builder panel as well. So those are ways of just testing out what your experience are going to look like without actually having to publish it and going live.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. So how do you develop a staffing model for the messaging side of your business?
Yeah, so when it comes to building staffing models, there's a couple of things that we want to have you thinking about. When we first migrated to messaging, we looked, were you going to answer that one, Steve, or did you want me to take
Yeah, I
that
think
one?
I was going to answer that.
Awesome. Go ahead.
So let me go ahead and jump in. When we first migrated to messaging, I basically used didn't have data before, so we used the previous chat data, and I worked to build a baseline going from there. It wasn't so hard because we did have everyone was cross trained, so if we needed more, we could always pull. But once we got some data going, we were able to look at how many tickets were created. There's a same day previous year. I like to look at previous years because I use that as a bookmark for what to expect, and how long the chats lasted, and how many chats do the agents handle at once. I don't suggest doing more than 3 or 4 because we want to make sure that they are able to focus, keep it as a conversation instead of delayed responses. There is a article in Zendesk help that actually details this process. I wish it was created when I started, but it's kind of similar, the same as what I do.
Well, awesome. We'll see if we can dig that up and put that in the chat as well. Awesome. Anything to add, Paul, real quick?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I do
Okay.
think that a workforce management session might be warranted at one point, or just one of the overall arching topics, because there's a lot to unpack there for sure. Comes up a lot.
Cool. And I think we answered what additional features will be available this year. So the last question we have here is, what kind of roadmap can you provide that excites us? So this is pretty similar to roadmap. Any feature gaps that you're looking to address? It sounds like you covered some of this already, at least.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what I get the most excited about is once we go beyond those feature gaps that people talk about a lot. I think we're really looking to close some of those gaps in the really near future. Proactive is one. I think it's the third time I've mentioned it now, but proactive is a big one that it's not a ton of customers use it, but at the same time, those who use it really care about it a lot. It's actually going to unlock a bunch of new use cases for messaging as well. That it has a lot of people on our side really looking forward to seeing it go live. A lot more opportunities to engage with the customer across the life cycle for anything from a support to a service to a sales use case. So that's going to unlock a ton. Like I said, Q1 of next year is when that one, early Q1 of next year is when that one's going to drop. This is SLAs is another big one. I know that people have been asking for that one a lot. There's some workarounds in place today, but for it to be fully baked into the product, it's coming out next quarter. And then there's some other workaround, bringing messaging into other areas of Zendesk as well, such as Sell. A lot imagine having being able to use Flow Builder, but for the flows that you would normally build out for customer outreach inside of Sell, for example. So we're going to be we're already working on bringing that into the play, and some workaround widgets as well. Around just unifying all of our widgets and SDKs, and bringing even more plugins, extensions, bringing voice into messaging, bringing other plugins as well, so that you're like that, so that the widget becomes the center of all conversations. So those are some of the stuff that we're pretty excited by.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Paul. And some real quick updates here before we head out. First, on August 30th, we've got another community event. This one's going to be about helping prepare your team and getting support set up to handle holiday rushes and other kind of rushes. Not everybody has a holiday rush, but look for that. And we'll pop a link in there so you can register for that now. We've got some great training for you around migrating to messaging. You can check training.zendesk.com to find those, and there's a certification for your agents on being omni-channel agents, so they can kind of show off their skills and test those. And finally, we would just want to highlight customer stories. So customer stories are a great way for you to highlight and showcase your brand, and they can lead to kind of speaking opportunities like Steve. Thank you so much for joining us here. But you can network with other folks and connect with industry leaders and things like that, and get some swag as well. So check those out. We're going to pop some links in there as well before we head out. But I just want to say thank you, Paul, for all that great information. Thank you, Megan and Steve, for that fireside chat. Special shout out to Steve for coming here during this busy. This got to be like a crazy time for all those college students moving back and forth. I remember that many years ago. But we really appreciate you being here. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks for all of your questions. Look for the email coming soon with the link to the recording and all of the questions and all of the links that we've shared in the chat. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your week, and we'll see you next time.